All right, well, Chris Boyd, thank you very much for coming in. Welcome. I think the appropriate place to start, since most people are unfamiliar with you and your candidacy, is for you to tell us a little bit about why you're running for this office.
I'm running because it's an exciting time in education as a whole. It's a very exciting time for education in Palo Alto because I think the school district has quite a few issues that need to be addressed by people that really are committed to fixing them. They're not small issues, they're large issues, and these issues, I think, will be something that draws a lot of very good minds. And I've spent the last 7 years really experimenting with advanced educational techniques. The reason I'm so excited about this period in time is because if you think of the Middle Ages, how an entire society that persisted and a social order that persisted for 1,000 years, which was based upon manually copying books. The technology that they had was to use calligraphy. The monks and religious establishment grew around them, and it really was a factor in molding the education of that period. In our times, thanks to Silicon Valley no less, in less than 15 years, we have had such a great revolution with all the new media that has come about, the integration of communication. It is so monumentous. So if we look at the medieval order that persisted for thousands of years, what disrupted it? I think it's the Gutenberg press. Once you could print books, once you had no longer this need for memorization and this arduous process of recording knowledge, and in fact, you could have a printing press printing things out at maximum speed. Suddenly that whole order, in a matter of decades, started to crumble, and new cities arose, and university cities came about. So we are precisely at this point in time where the modes of education which came about, which have lasted for 150 years, printing textbooks, putting kids in classes, having teachers in front of the classes, are totally obsolete. And it's the most exciting moment, I think, to be in education. So I've been experimenting for the past 7 years. Well, what happens if you take the latest technologies, the smartest minds, which are postdocs and professors and people at Stanford and people in Silicon Valley, and put them all together and experiment with as many different kinds of new education, new ideas about education as possible, and see what happens. So after a lot of mistakes and a lot of successes, we kind of have a model of things that could be of great benefit to the Palo Alto Unified School District. So I just have to dive in and move into the election. There's no greater collection of intellect than in this Bay Area. And at this point in time, education is so important to all of them because so many of them have children.
Have you been involved in the Palo Alto District at all up until now?
I've been a parent. Mm-hmm. So my daughter has been to Barron Park. She has been to Addison, been to Jordan and Terman. I have visited hands-on, interacted with teachers, administrators, staff people at all different levels. I was probably the first person to run and greet Dr. McGee when he was brought on board, who made an incredible innovation, which I'll get to later if I'm asked, in the school district that he's not been recognized for, but it's called authentic research, which is an incredible step forward in education. And I think I was almost the first person to rush up and shake Dr. Austin's hand. So I've really met the entire spectrum of people at the Palo Alto Unified School District.
So your daughter is still in the school district?
At this point, she is still in the district.
used the word "we" a couple of times. I wonder if you could explain who "we" is in terms of the people you're working with at Stanford and on the
We
various
are
innovations you're
basically parents who faced a lot of the Palo Alto Unified School District's, shall we say, benefits in educating our children. And we felt that there was a lot of progress that had to be made. I mean, when these kids do fantastic things and run around with iPhones, and when you see them programming by themselves, when you see them building robots, doing wonderful things, you ask yourself, well, there's some revolution here afoot. That same feeling is, I found, in many professors at Stanford. A lot of them have children in the school district. A lot of them are doing research and education of their own accord. Some of them focus in research in education. But primarily, we're just a group of parents and shall we say, academia of the highest order, researchers, getting together to create a learning space for kids. And we formed a group called Instead.
So, who are some of these people? Yeah, that's a good general description. Who are the people at Stanford, the professors at Stanford that you're working with on this project?
They have been involved with Instead, Dr. Ranjan Nag. Some of the names I
Is he with the School of Education?
No, he's actually a brilliant entrepreneur, and he's done a fellow. There's a program called the Stanford Fellows. But I'm not here to sell my credibility based on that.
No, I understand, but we're trying to get to know you and what you're doing.
That's correct.
Instead,
so
was
Dr.
formed by
Ranjan
you.
Nag was part of Instead. There was a fantastic, brilliant man. His name escapes me right now, but hopefully it'll come to mind. That worked with the Dalai Lama to set up a center of compassion research. There are several physicians like Melania Trump. These are some of the people that I think were really very supportive of Instead. People like Dr. Mandeep Gill, who is a researcher at SLAC, Dr. Rebecca Lin. I think at this time she's got her PhD. There are a number of different names. If you want, I can give you a full list.
Are you working with the School of Education?
No.
These
No.
are
These are people that we brought into the program or were interested in the program,
okay.
and contributed the, shall we say, the knowledge that was taught to the kids. Our whole, some of the things that we've observed that work are that, for example, textbooks have in fact become totally obsolete objects. There is so much good research that is happening real time in the laboratories that if you can connect the kids and the researchers, you have a fantastic medium for them to actually learn in. And with communication technology, you can expand this basically around the world. You can have a classroom that is totally expandable.
In my understanding, what Instead is doing is operating after-school programs.
That's correct. We pick up kids after school. We several classrooms were borrowed up at Stanford. We had a space operating at Jordan, which we decided to test the program at Jordan. And
That's going on now?
No, at this point, we're thinking of taking it to East Palo Alto, because this is open to people, not only of Palo Alto, but of any and every, shall we say, background.
So what schools now are doing this program?
We're starting up in October, and I'll let you know where we will be located. But at this point, we're thinking either Palo Alto or back at a Stanford classroom.
Okay. And last school year, what schools were you in last school year?
We have been up in the Stanford Stanford classrooms for the last about three years.
Is it primarily Palo Alto School District students, or who are the students enrolled?
Primarily Palo Alto Unified School District students.
And how many students were enrolled last year?
The last, we typically enroll about 5 to 10 students.
So you said in Stanford classrooms? What do you mean by that? Do you mean you're using Stanford University classrooms?
That's correct, to run the classroom.
And so who is arranging?
Different faculty will sponsor us.
Okay. And then, so you've taken is this per quarter, these 5 students that would come over to Stanford? Just trying to get an idea. I can't picture this program.
Right. It's basically usually a minimum of 5 to 10 students. And they go through a schedule of probably about 4 regular university classes. What we tested was if you structure the kids' curriculum so that they're studying chemistry, math, what a typical undergraduate would take in the first year. Then,
Are these high school students or
no,
of all ages?
They range from elementary school up to middle school, and we are planning to work with high school students as part of a more formal research program. The accomplishments of the kids in the program are quite extraordinary. You get second graders who can build and put together 2D plotters. You get second graders who study animal behavior and are able to regurgitate and really explain the science behind animal behavior. So I'd say that basic classes are physics, animal behavior, we have mathematics, we have astrophysics, we have strong biochemistry.
For elementary school kids?
Yes, absolutely.
And these are from what elementary school in Palo Alto?
They are from different schools. They're mainly from Jordan.
That's not an elementary school, middle school.
Well, we held it at Jordan, but Addison, I would say Addison.
Addison?
Yes, in Barron Park.
And who's providing the instruction?
Postdocs from Stanford.
So how will serving on the Palo Alto School Board, how does that tie into what you're doing professionally? School board members obviously have to deal with a whole range of topics and generally aren't very immersed in curriculum decisions except at the very highest level. So how will you bring this experience and use it on the school board? How will you contribute to this Palo Alto School Board?
Yeah, the Palo Alto Unified School District is a district where kids have so much stress that there's so many instances of the stress being an overpowering and crippling force. I think that it's critical to get the message out to parents, not to the school board, not to the administrators, but to parents. There are many different avenues in education that need to be explored in their pursuit of, shall we say, an education for their kids. That just because something exists at the Palo Alto Unified School District, it's absolutely no guarantee of success in life. You know, it's absolutely no guarantee of even getting admitted to a high-performing university. It is a place where we need to sit down, administrators, teachers, parents, and be open to exploring the wealth of opportunities that technology has brought to us. There are any number of ways to teach physics. There are any number of times when you can work physics into the curriculum. To teach it from a textbook as the 12th grade is perhaps the most inefficient way to teach a kid the science. If, for example, you take the movie Interstellar, which is so exciting, yet factually put together by one of the leading physicists in the world today. Everything you saw in that movie, if you saw the movie, is completely factually state-of-the-art physics. You get the kids in an immersive environment where physics is talked about, where you talk about multiple universes, different dimensions of time. You can engage their mind because their mind is the mind of a scientist. Kids start out with the gift of evolution to have minds of scientists, so we wouldn't have survived as a species. We put them inside the system, and then by the time they get to college, we try to make them creative. A kid that is in the 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade fully understands parallel universes because they imagine them. Einstein's contribution was to think originally. And when you talk about string theory, when you talk about so many different concepts, children relate to them immediately.
So again, how do you bring that viewpoint to the board and actually affect school board policy?
You basically teach the board that what happened, let's say, with the mathematics re-engineering of the curriculum, where they added 7A, for instance, math 7A, 8A, it's supposed to be an accelerated preparation to be a world-class math instructional course, has other ways that can perhaps work so much better. And you get the board to be willing, instead of spending so much money on legal expenses, fighting special education kids, parents who are desperate to get special education for their kids, you convince them that this money should be spent perhaps exploring and promoting excellence in teaching, so that at the Palo Alto Unified School District, we can set a bar to be the world's greatest educational institution. At the Palo Alto Unified School District, we teach the kids, in many cases, of the world's greatest minds. And this message is fully understood by the parents, to send the children to an institution that is so full of stress, has so much bullying, harassment, is sad. And yet the end product doesn't even reach what you would get by sending your kids to South Korea. And this is the important lesson. At South Korea, they of course are now perhaps #1 in education, but their kids work over 18 hours every single day studying from dawn to dusk. Finland may be 5th, but they don't even permit children to be taught reading until they're 7 or 8 years old. So either one of those two examples is so far ahead of where we are today in our educational system, whether you walk into Pali, Gun, or any of the middle schools. And yet, both of those offer us tremendous lessons. And my message to the board, my message to the teachers is, we can do this. There's so much money spent each year on education, $250 million. A tiny fraction of that would allow us to begin to make progress in improving our educational courses and curriculum. Getting back to math, accelerated math. We spent so much money implementing that. First of all, the concept itself is flawed. It is, if you separate genius level kids, quote unquote, the most advanced ones, and put them in their own little math track, we're somehow going to teach them math better. That whole concept is flawed. Joe Bowler was a magnificent teacher in the School of Education and Mathematics, would point to research where when you take a single classroom and you have kids of incredibly high academic performance, turn them into teachers to kids of lower academic performance, the students who have high academic performance suddenly drastically increase their learning rate, their learning speeds, right? So the problem that we have is that nobody at this point in the board is willing to think out of the box. I'm shocked because we all voted for Ken Daubert, Todd Collins, Terry Godfrey. They're all wonderful, wonderful people. But it becomes so overwhelming once they're in the board that it is like they are in handcuffs. There's no critical thought. There's no stimulus to address all of the board's big problems today. We have huge problems at the Palo Alto Unified School District. And my ability and also my background allows me to say, well, let us solve problems. Let us raise the bar, think of new solutions. And getting back again to a case of what has been done at the Palo Alto Unified School District, they rushed and implemented this system, endless consultation with the public, and they came up with this accelerated track. Of course, you know, everyone wants to be in the accelerated track, but it's nowhere near performing as high as Singapore or any of the other world-class brain powers.
So you mentioned you want to bring your experience to this board.
To create a dialogue.
As I see from your background, it seems as though, except for the last several years, your background has been entirely a IT technical background.
Yes.
So what is it that happened to you 8 years ago that made you an expert on educational philosophy?
I'm not an expert of educational philosophy. I am a person that recognizes that we are in a new era and we need to try new solutions. But before, that's a very interesting question. May I just take a step back? Because I want to explain to you the big error in judgment that was made in implementing a whole new curriculum. It was never tested ahead of time. If you're going to do something, like create a whole new math track, you put it out there. You create a small pilot. You make as many mistakes in a small pilot before scaling it up to thousands of students. And that wasn't done. Those simple quality techniques are contributions that, you know, I certainly can make because you have such a great ability to teach these brilliant minds. The kids are absolutely brilliant in our school district, and as kids are. They want to learn physics. They want to learn math. They come in as fourth graders and say, Chris, can you teach us calculus? We want to know what calculus is. And the answer is yes. You do teach those kids calculus. They will not understand the derivation of mathematical concepts that, let me say, a person studying calculus in high school will. They can fully understand the concept of integration. They can fully understand the concept of derivation. They can graph out all sorts of graphical different kinds of models, and they can use a tool like Mathematica would. So once a student becomes an engineer, they will use Mathematica to do all the integration. So by us coming in the fourth grade, making them fully familiar with these kinds of tools, plus so many others, this is the message that is so important, that in the best, what could be the best school district in the world, we have this obligation to our children to try to come up with all sorts of new courses, new ways of teaching, take what is really out there in the world, incorporate it in our curriculum, and really get the best school district that we possibly can. And that's not being done now.
So, Chris, you said that there are huge problems that need to be solved in the district. And we've been asking all the candidates about legal issues, homework policy, special ed, Title IX, compliance, housing, labor union relations. Can we talk about some of those and get your thoughts on how you would solve these problems that are existing? For example, do you favor a general counsel being hired by the school district?
Could I address those in totality first, rather than talk about a specific issue right off the bat? Because there's a bigger picture. There's a very big picture. Just as we are going through a technological revolution, we are going through a revolution in which women define themselves and have raised fundamental issues to our society. And this is a moment that is so important. We have to ask ourselves, with what has happened at the Palo Alto Unified School District, how we really tackle human respect, the respect of a man towards a woman, a respect towards a teacher and a student, how we handle the problems that we see there. We can't jump in and talk about solutions. Why is there so much bullying? Why is there so much harassment? Why have so many girls been hurt in this environment? Why is it that when you take girls out of, let's say, an educational environment like we have here in the Palo Alto Unified School District and put them all together as girls, why do they suddenly drastically learn much more than when they're in a co-ed classroom? What is in the textbook that is so alienating? There's so many questions that have to do with human respect, one towards another. And right now, Palo Alto is a huge, it's a failure of honesty. It's a failure of integrity, because we have had cases so severe as a principal not respecting his obligation and dating students, or sexually harassing teachers, or retaliating when people complain about this. This is a huge crisis, and it doesn't matter whether you hire a general counsel or not. If you do not have the integrity to stand up in front of these kids and say, there's something wrong here, and this is wrong, and we made a mistake, and be honest about everything that has happened, you're not going to make any progress at all in changing it. It's no better than introducing this failed math course. Hiring a general counsel is a failure of vision. Why do we have to have a general counsel? Well, because we have lawsuits, someone would say. So we should hire a general counsel so we don't spend so much money on our lawsuits. Makes sense, doesn't it? Absolutely not. It's totally immoral. The reason that the Palo Alto Unified School District has, take a number which I believe to be correct, $5 million in lawsuits, needs a general counsel, is because they're denying special education services time and time again, because there are all of these cases of sexual harassment time and time again.
So what's the first step you would take to address that as a board member?
Honesty.
Would you pass a policy?
Dr. Austin,
how would you address that?
first of all, we need to publish the information of what actually has occurred. We need to acknowledge as a community that we have failed, and we need to recognize that our lack of compassion, love, and care for each other is what has caused us to fail. And all these symptoms really are because of our failure as people to care for each other. Now, this has a solution, obviously. Once we recognize the solution, which is to put into place remediation of human relations, then we can stop sexual assaults. But it's very, very hard. And you can't just look at hiring a general counsel as doing anything at all. It would take for free, and their parents that have offered, bring somebody in and provide the special educational services that are being denied right and left by people who are totally untrained. Just give those special services. When you have a child that has a speech defect, and the poor parents are desperate to get services for the child, services are denied. Time and time and time again. If you go and you see what's really happening is that special education services are denied, and we have a horrific track record, and the cumulative effect now has been to probably be going to cost the district something like $5 million a year. So what do? We call a board meeting, and we have secrecy. We spend $2.5 million like this. That's the money that all the children, the parents, everybody that is raising money for PI, PTA. We work a whole year to get money on that scale to fund the services. And at the last board meeting, you spent virtually $2.5 million on paying in advance. Can you believe this? Who gets paid in advance? $1.1 million was paid in advance to the attorneys to litigate against parents of special education services. We signed a contract to create a deputy superintendent to deal with Title IX issues. We hire general counsel to manage all of our litigation. That's another $750. It's $250 per year, 3-year contracts. And this is what the Palo Alto Unified School District has become. It is no longer an institute of education. It has become an institute of repression. And for the record, even the transparency that the Palo Alto Unified School District wants to have, claims to have, is flawed. That entire process was done in secret without public discussion. There is a board rule called the 2-meeting rule where you publish something, you talk about the public, they raise issues, and all of those were waived. The board insisted on passing $2.5 million under the blanket. Your publication said nothing about it. Shame on you. Absolutely shame on you. I immediately, no other publication did, so you're not the only one. I immediately put a complaint together, complaining that this was done without the transparency necessary, that it violated the Brown Act, that it violated the 2-meeting rule and other California provisions. So I had to work as a lawyer to put together a surely flawed document, but something that would stop this locomotive of expense. You could take $2.5 million and you could have this best special education program in the United States. And that's what my candidacy is about, getting those sort of issues raised to the parents, because the parents can get it, and good proposals put forth. So my issue to the general counsel is, don't get it, because you have a flawed set of values, and the only thing they're going to do is use a lawyer, all this power, to fight parents. Now, parents are desperate to get special education for their kids. Their whole families are falling to pieces with the burden of carrying all the special services, all the problems that they have to cope with. They finally say, I can't take it anymore. I have to seek a lawyer. And then you hire a general counsel to destroy them. That's really bad.
I'm curious if there's a particular action the board has taken in the last 2 years that you take disagreement with, and if you could critique that action and then say also what you would have done differently if you were on the board at the time.
I think this action that we're talking about is about the worst, because the Title IX issue is so severe. I mean, for the board, and this is really the same issue. So the board has had the same issue. You can time roll it backwards. Let us go back 2 years ago. You had a principal, a man that all parents put their trust in, administrators put their trust in, the board puts its trust in, and he's in a position where he behaves in a totally untrustworthy fashion. Once a young girl has gone through experiences, rape, sexual assault, harassment, even denial of special services, bullying, those are such horrific accidents, they may drop out of school. They may face psychiatric treatments. I mean, and I think the board is really flawed for not having taken decisive action.
So are you referring to an action related to former Palo principal Phil Winston?
Yeah, I think that there was no action taken. There was no decisive action taken. I think people, I think the Palo Alto Unified School District parents, 30% want to replace everybody. 30% feel you can perhaps salvage some of the system, and 30% don't care. Make that 33% across the board. The mistake, the trust, is at the board level, because it is their responsibility to have a safe school system for kids. And the board, 2 years ago, should have passed measures that eliminated any question that sexual harassment would be tolerated, that not meeting special education laws would be tolerated, and I think, or that bullying and harassment, you can say it, but if it goes on in the school, that's a major default. That's institutional default. They have a responsibility to have really overseen that process. They not sit behind the board or expect Dr. McGee to somehow deal with it.
Do you think Kim DiOrio should have been terminated for her handling of the Palo sexual assault case that came out last year?
All of them should have. Absolutely. You need black and white action. I think that Dr. McGee was made a scapegoat, but that the blame really lies with a system that has no clear principle and no means to affect and educate everybody. You've got to educate the students to prevent this from happening, educate the teachers. And the sheer magnitude of the problem was not recognized by the board. And please don't think that I don't love these people. I voted for them all. If I get the job, I'll probably not do as good as they are. But you asked me, what would I have done differently? And what I would have done differently is vacated the administrative, shall we say, leadership that was letting this happen. There should have been an early recognition of a problem, and it's the board's responsibility to do that, not sit back and expect all the decisions to be made perfectly by the superintendent.
I want to just make sure that you haven't left anybody with the impression that Phil Winston was ever accused of raping a student. He was not. You made reference to rape, and that was never part of the allegations against Phil Winston.
That's good, because I did not say that.
You did, but that's why I wanted to clarify it.
No, I pointed out that the fact that these things are happening.
But it was after you mentioned Phil Winston as the principal of Palo Alto High School. In any case, we're running out of time. I did want to ask you what the Institute for Education Management is. Is that the same as INSTEAD, or is that something different?
Instead, that is a nonprofit organization. It has existed for decades, and it basically is fostered to further education. It primarily was working on solving brilliant educational problems, and they sponsored INSTEAD.
And where are they based?
Here in Palo Alto.
Okay, so do you run that organization?
No,
Who runs that?
It's a completely separate organization. I don't know who's running it at this time, nor is it a matter of issue. I don't know who is on the board of that, and it's not mine.
Well, your website says that charitable contributions can be made to support your work by giving to that organization.
Yes. Yes,
So
either that organization
how do you get the money
or
from them?
Hillel. And I want to just clarify that the funds that have come to our organization have primarily been given by the parents. So IEM invested money to get INSTEAD off the ground. But since then, we have been running with our own funds. But
Who helped you get off the ground? The Institute for
yes,
Education Management.
Yes.
So we can't find any record of that in the IRS, the state of California. There's no such group. There's no such tax-exempt status.
Of
Can you-
IEM?
Of the Institute for Education Management.
Okay.
Can you clarify that?
Yeah, do you mind if I look it up?
No, why don't we do that after we're
Let
done?
me do it right here online, because
If it would help, I can give you a printout of all of the tax-exempt organizations that
no, I don't need it.
resemble that name.
I have a copy. IEM Inc. Nonprofit Tax ID 77.
Wait, hang on a second. What are you referencing there?
I'm giving you the nonprofit ID since
In California?
it's
What
federal.
website are you on?
I have my own document, which says right here, IEM Inc. Nonprofit Tax ID 7703577175.
And what are you calling it?
IEM Inc.
I Am Inc.?
Here, take a look. IEM Inc.
I'm not sure where I'm supposed to be
Oh,
looking.
right up here at the top. It's as clear as daylight.
Okay, but what you've said is that it's the Institute for Education Management.
Yes, it's those three letters are IEN. It's listed as IEN.
Okay.
So you should have dug deeper, Bill.
Well,
You have to dig
the
deeper.
initials.
This is really important. The kids.
It is very important.
The kids really need. Now, what I'd like to do is.
And so I don't understand though. You're asking people to donate to
No, I'm
support
not asking
you
to
through that organization.
No, they were the, shall we say, the angel donors that gave us sufficient money to get started.
And when was
The
that?
Parents, I'll have to give you the date on that. That's not in my records, but probably 1977. No, sorry, that's their founding date. But I think it was 2017, 2016. I'll email you the exact date if that interests you.
Yeah,
But you should dig deeper because you're focusing on stuff that is so trivial when there is a real election. The board has just spent $2.5 million, and the kids, today, tomorrow, day after, they're not getting their special education benefits, where principals are rewarded based upon budget that excludes special education services. Now, it's not what the Palo Alto Unified School District intends, but it is what is happening. And this is what a publication like yours should really be doing. You should have published that I served a Brown Act complaint to the Palo Alto Unified School District to try to get some public discussion for all the parents to know that they're going to work for a whole year, and all the funds that they're contributing will probably go to cover paid in advance fees for lawyers of $1.1 million, deputy superintendent.
I don't know what you're talking about. Paying for fees in advance, that was not what the board was voting on. We couldn't understand your Brown Act complaint.
Did you look up, again, you need to dig deeper. Did you look up the $1.1 million and the law firms to whom those checks were written? And now, what were those checks for? What is that $1.1 million?
We have multiple law firms that are doing multiple legal work for the district.
Yeah, those firms are notorious among special ed parents. Those are the ones that litigate against us.
That's a different point.
No, that is not the different point, because that money is going to go precisely to be used against special education kids.
Right.
And we...
That's not true, but I understand what you're saying.
I think you probably are disconnected from the many, and you shouldn't be, if Palo Alto is spending so much money on special ed litigation and paying this $1.1 million, you've got to realize there is something wrong. And those, first of all, to pay anything like that a year in advance of fees for law firms that litigate special ed.
There's nothing that's been paid a year in advance.
That was stated at the meeting. You need to dig deeper and listen to the meeting.
Okay. I'll go back and look at it. If you promise you will too.
I was at the meeting, I remember.
I was
Do you
watching
remember
the
it,
meeting.
Elena?
Yeah, I do.
See that?
They were not all towards special litigation. A lot of that, like the AALR has helped a lot with the OCR compliance, the resolution that the district signed last year. It's not all related to special ed work, and I'm not aware of anything that was approved a year in advance for the law firms.
I think that was one of the statements by Ms. Mack, but we'll have to go back and look
I think
at
you
it.
need to check the tape.
Okay.
Chris Boyd, thank you very much for
Thank
being
you.
here, and good luck in your campaign.